Welcome to the Mindfulness Academy Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Morgan, and on today's show, we have Dr. Lori Desautels. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a joy to have you here this morning. And for those of you who are able to see and not just hear, she has an adorable cat on her lap. Who is this? We need to know.
This is Stella. This is our baby, our 11-year-old rescue. One of them.
She's gorgeous. Absolutely
Thank
gorgeous. Well, I want to tell everyone a little bit about your background and then we'll hop right in. Dr. Lori Desautels teaches educational neuroscience in both undergraduate and graduate programs at Butler University, which heavily focuses on nervous system development and how adversity and trauma impact the developing brain and body through an educational lens. Over the past decade, her revelations in education has used a neuroscience framework to address both personally and professionally children and the adults that sit beside them. Lori's work helps local clients and schools, as well as international organizations in Syria and Beirut, through her virtual consultation on the impact of earthquakes and war on children. Dr. Desautels is a sought-after speaker and the author of several books, including Connections Over Compliance, Rewiring Our Perceptions of Discipline. Her new book, also a manual, titled Body and Brain Brilliance, a manual to cultivate awareness and practices for our nervous system, will be published in 2024. Congratulations on another book. How exciting is
Thank
that?
you.
How
Yeah,
exciting
thank
is
you
that?
so much.
Do you know when it might be published? Have you set a date there?
So I believe it's going to be this summer, probably the end of July or 1st of August.
Well, what a blessing for the educational system that that's getting published this summer.
Thank you.
I believe I like to start with where we connected, where this connection happened. And I believe it was Gabby Fisher, who's on your team, who connected us many a year ago. And she has been a dear friend of mine for many, many years. And oh my goodness, she has nothing but amazing things to say about you. And I have thought several times what a blessing it is that she gets to work with you, because it is definitely
Well,
her passion too.
yeah, she is a blessing to me. I could not do this work without her. And she just sits right beside me and went through the certification at Butler a few years ago as well. So that's how we met. And she's taken this work into where we are today. So I'm so grateful.
I'm wondering if you would tell us a little bit about your background. Just give us a snapshot about where you grew up, a little bit of your educational background personally.
Well, I'm actually from Indiana and grew up in Anderson, which is not too far from Indianapolis, and then moved to South Bend, Indiana for a few years. Taught in Elkhart and went to Butler University. I just can't believe that I'm instructing there, teaching there now. But so I'm a former special education teacher. I taught children with the classification or ruling of emotionally disturbed, behavior disordered. And I was in that classroom with upper elementary students for about 7 years. And then we moved back to Indianapolis and taught here for a while. And then opened up Indianapolis Counseling Center, where we worked with families that had children and adolescents that were being challenged in their school environments. And I also worked at Methodist Hospital here in Indianapolis on the adolescent psychiatric unit as a liaison between schools and families. So I worked with the physicians on the treatment teams on Wednesdays as we helped it kind of reintegrate those adolescents who were hospitalized for a variety of mental and emotional challenges. So, and then taught at Marian University for about 7.5 years. That's where this work started to be seeded. And actually, I wrote a white paper for the framework, Applied Educational Neuroscience. And then the wonderful Dr. Ina Shelley, my former dean from Butler University, asked me to come to Butler on a full-time appointment. And so I've been at Butler since 2016 and taking this work into the world. And I'm so grateful to do it.
It definitely feels like a life's mission. Whenever I think about you and have thought about you over the years, I think this is a woman on a mission. You have kind of this, it feels like to me, from where I sit, this divine purpose that you are just, you're living out.
It really has wings of its own, and I appreciate you affirming that. It is a spiritual calling. And when I say spiritual, not really religious at all, but it's a real spiritual, it's part of, it's purposeful. It's part of, who I am and who, I guess I'm becoming with this work. I'm learning every day.
Amazing. As we've spoken about this as kind of your calling, that's a big thing in our lives, to find our calling and then to have the faith to lean into it. And you have very much so. So my question is, what led you to an educational career?
Well, I feel as if so many of the children and adolescents that I have worked with over the past 30 years have been so misunderstood. And I misunderstood them as a young teacher. I really was only looking at behaviors. And even though I had their background as a special education teacher, we really work to create those individual educational programs, those IEPs. But I just still felt that there was something we weren't seeing and delving into. And so I think that's where my passion really took off. I wanted to learn so much more about the behavior. And I really feel as a practitioner at Butler and in the schools that I'm working in, that's what I do. I study behavior and really delve underneath just to look at context and the environment. And now what we know, the adverse childhood experiences impact the developing brain and nervous system. So that was a significant journey, and it continues to be a journey because we do misunderstand. So I think that's where I began, and that's where I continue to learn.
You wear a lot of hats. You and I've talked about several of those hats. I'm wondering if you could tell us about some of those hats, because it goes beyond your work at Butler, which is significant in and of itself. What else is there?
So I actually am in the classroom 2 mornings or 2 afternoons a week. And when I was at Marian University, I really deeply felt that as professors in the colleges of education or schools of education, that we needed to be back in the classroom consistently and predictably, and we weren't. There was a divide. There was this void where we're preparing teachers, preparing pre-service teachers, but yet we're not in touch with what's happening on the ground. And so I asked my dean, Dr. Hill, at that time, if I could take a semester and go back into the classroom. And that was in the middle of the semester, and I couldn't do that. But we worked it out so that I was able to have a course release. And I took that to Butler with me. Dr. Shelley agreed to that. And so part of my faculty appointment was being back in the classroom a couple of mornings or a morning and an afternoon. So I've been back in the classroom it's been 11 years. I can't believe it. 11 years. And this has driven the work. This is the work. My lab is the classroom. And I also want to share this morning that this work is about us personally. It's not just about us professionally. So when you ask about hats, I would have been a different, younger mom had I known what I know today. I am a different mom to my 3 adult children. but I would have parented differently. I would have been a different teacher as a young teacher. And we don't drop who we are when we walk into our offices, to our schools, to our organizations, to our roles and responsibilities professionally. We carry in our embodied experiences, our generational trauma, our what Dr. Porges calls neuroception, because I work closely with Dr. Porges and the Polyvagal Institute. So we have to really understand that deeply, and to know that that's why we get triggered, we get activated, and we can unintentionally escalate those children and adolescents around us. And it's about us. I mean, the adults go first.
I have a lot to unpack with you around that.
Yeah.
Very rich conversation here. First, I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about how you would parent differently. And just so I don't forget, I love this concept of, I mean, essentially, getting your own mask on the plane. So taking care of ourselves so we can, in turn, be strong for others. So let's talk about the first one. I mean, as the parent, as a mom of young-ish children at this point, what would you have done differently and why?
Immediately, what comes to mind is taking care of my own nervous system. I could get activated and triggered like we all do as caregivers, as parents. And I was disciplining and using punitive practices when I was dysregulated. And nothing good came from that. I mean, looking back and reflecting upon those developing years, and our children are watching us, they observe us. And so I think, if I had stepped back and I had resourced my own nervous system before we delved into a conversation or before we consequenced, it would have made a world of difference. So I would oftentimes jump into the power struggle and into that conflict in a very dysregulated state. In fact, more often than not. And we were back at it again, especially our oldest son, who struggled with anxiety, and he struggled with social anxiety his entire life. And and also really, I think, he was never really diagnosed with ADD. Maybe he was, but I feel like that was a challenge too. And I think that the comorbidity of those kind of labels, and I like to move away from those labels because it's really about the nervous system, but it activated me. And as parents, we are fearful. We want our children to be happy, and we want them to feel peaceful, and we want the best for them. So when things aren't going well, we tend to personalize it, and we tend to get wrapped up in the chaos, and we get in the fray and we do with our students as well. But I just remember being in the fray a lot with Andrew, and that's what would change. Yeah.
This feels like a good opportunity to talk about regulation, because I think you kind of answered both the questions in one, which is very insightful. Let's talk about how we regulate our nervous system. I'm particularly interested in, of course, mindfulness, and I think that you use the term what is it that you use? Focused attention practices. So let's talk in that sphere right now. But before we begin, would you tell me what mindfulness or focused attention really is in layman's terms? Break it down to the base level.
Well, I'm grateful for that question, because mindfulness is so broad and it can be defined in so many different ways. And it also is not taken as seriously as it needs to be, because oftentimes we're not specific enough in defining it. So when we think about mindfulness, it's really about focus. It's about attention. It's about intention. So attention and intention. And it's also about awareness. So we have this really complex nervous system. And in this prefrontal cortex area are the mental skills that we call executive functions. And those don't fully develop until young adulthood. And development is chaotic, it's not linear. But mindfulness, or what we call focused attention practices, are the exercises that help us to focus on a stimulus. So oftentimes it's our breath. It can be a sound, it can be a taste, it can be an image, but it is a way for us to practice developing those executive functions through patterned repetition. So when I'm asked to focus on my breath, and I might focus for, I might say, let's, for a minute, let's breathe in our favorite color and breathe out a worry. Or, for our younger children, we might say, let's breathe in, your favorite smell and breathe out something that just is disgusting or yucky, and so we really try to use a lot of different ways for them to use breath through sound and taste. We're always using breath and movement. I left out movement. So focused attention practices are now globally defined as this, that's mindfulness. So when I'm using those practices, I'm providing my nervous system the opportunity to exercise those areas of that prefrontal cortex where we do school and where we do life. So I don't know if that was layman's terms, but we need right here in behind those eyebrows is where we hold sustained attention, working memory. We're able to problem solve. We can be creative. We can predict well. We can make associations. And so those are the mental skills that we need as we move through our lives.
So the assumption is, of course, that if we're not breathing well, if we are scattered in our thinking and our attention, that our creativity suffers and our ability to focus in school would suffer and make associations, like you'd said. It cripples the ability to be an effective human, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and it's a warm up. You would never go out and run a marathon, without, or you would never try something new that has longevity without warming up first or learning about it or preparing or priming for that experience. So when we talk about focused attention practices in our schools, it's a part of our procedures, and in our homes, it's like, what do the first 10 minutes feel like with our children? When they wake up in the morning, it's like, how are we priming their nervous system for the day? What are the last 10, 20 minutes, half hour before, we go to sleep at night? And then how do we transition throughout a school day, or how do we transition in our homes? It's very important. Those warm-ups and priming and preparing the nervous system get us to those spaces where we can learn deeply and we can emotionally regulate, hold attention, problem solve, and again, all those mental skills that we need.
There are two things that stick out to me in this section that we've been talking about. I love how you, and I'm sure many others, have adapted focused attention practices to be so accessible to children. As a beautiful practice, gives me goosebumps. I love that it feels fun and accessible to them. I'm assuming it would be kind of fun to think. I practiced when you were saying that, breathing in my favorite color and letting go of some worry, and it's amazing what one good focused breath can do. I know for
Mhm.
me, it is mind blowing. Now, if I can get in 2, 3, 5, or several minutes, I mean, it just kind of keeps going up from there, but it's very powerful. I also really love, and I don't think we've talked about this on the Mindfulness Academy podcast, the concept of mindfulness being a warm up. I
Mhm.
love that. We stretch and warm up and whatnot when we go to lift weights or run or whatnot. And the brain, so we're saying the brain is a muscle. We need to warm it up. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a very accessible way to talk about it with kids and also with educators. It just makes
Mhm.
sense. I love that. So excellent work. I, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your path to mindfulness. I'm wondering, did this start long ago, or you started talking about, polyvagal? Was there a point at which you realized, wow, this is either it was really important to you or really important to your work? How did it unfold?
Well, I think personally, I always, I think that we find something that feels aligned with our own nervous systems. And I practiced yoga for 20 years. And so it really is yoga, and Pilates are a daily part of my life. And being on my mat is grounding for me. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, I wish that I could go to a yoga class every day, but with my travel schedule, I can't. But I have found a routine, whether I'm at home or traveling or in a hotel. It becomes a part of my routine, and it is a part of my day. So I think that's how the mindful practices began to evolve, because I was feeling the benefit of having a ritual in my own life as a young mom. And I would take the time, and I would, and I remember doing yoga with my children. And we would put videos on, and we would do that. And then I started studying the breath. And in my doctoral work, I really looked at the power of um, how, I guess, priming the nervous system impacts behavior. And so it had kind of an organic evolution, but it began with my own practice.
Excellent. Excellent. You mentioned your routine, your daily routine. Do you have a particular morning routine? That's always something that's of great interest to folks, especially folks who have, a very focused life, high achievers, just, seeing behind the curtain a little bit and seeing what
Mhm.
happens in the morning. Is that it, or is there anything else?
I am a huge morning person, and I wake up and grab my coffee and start working. So I don't do my practices in the morning. I always, I'm mindful of taking some deep breaths before I get out of bed. I'm always aware, like always aware of how I'm experiencing my nervous system, not just my brain, but my nervous system. But for me, there is a practice called nidra, and it's also called it's a term that Dr. Huberman uses, and he talks about it on his podcast, non-sleep deep rest. And there is a lot of robust literature that supports this practice. So it's where we are awake, but we are doing a body scan as we lay down. And it is one of my most favorite practices. And I don't do it every day, but probably 3 or 4 times a week. And you can do it for 10 minutes, you can do it for 20 minutes, you can do it before you go to bed at night. And there are so many wonderful videos for guidance. So that is something that I prioritize.
Yeah, yoga nidra and yin yoga are two of my very favorite modalities. I'm glad that you brought that up. To our listeners, if you have not looked up yoga nidra, do it. There's
Mhm.
plenty, even just on YouTube, to kind of give you a little taste of what it might be like. It is very relaxing and I find very restorative.
Mhm.
I really
No,
enjoy it.
and there's a lot of research that backs that up. Even an hour of yoga nidra or 45 minutes is worth, I think it equates to 4 hours of deep sleep. So.
That is impressive. I had forgotten that stat. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about, and I don't know if you call them clients. I don't know what the terminology is here, but would you talk a little bit about kind of who your target audience, or if you call them
Mhm.
clients, patients, however you want to refer to them, who are they and how do you help?
Well, I work with educators. That's my primary audience. So, and parents and caregivers, mental health professionals, social workers, counselors. So I think, if we think of primary and secondary audience, my primary audience would be educators, administrators, school counselors, social workers, teachers, support staff, bus drivers, office staff, custodial staff. I mean, really, we all are touch points for our children who walk into our buildings and into our districts and communities. So, but I do a lot of work with organizations as well, the juvenile system, mental health systems practices that work with schools, clinics, and trauma is so ubiquitous that, I mean, you cannot grow up on this planet without experiencing some adversity and trauma. I mean, it's a part of being human. And so that that's the audience.
Excellent. And you train them on nervous system awareness and
Mhm.
modalities to kind of cool the system down for themselves, but also for their students. Is that how it
Right.
works? Okay.
Yes. And understanding that not only is behavior communicating to us at all times, but it's just a signal. It's an indicator that the nervous system is struggling. And so when we can tap into the language of the nervous system, which is, I just did a TED talk and focused just on that pillar, that the language of the nervous system is where we get to the root. Um, and as parents, as caregivers, as clinicians, and as educators, when we can tap into the language of the nervous system, then our clients, our children, our adolescents, those that we sit beside begin to feel empowered and they begin to feel relieved.
You talked about trauma being ubiquitous. Let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the current student trauma load. What is happening with our students?
It's a lot right now. And for any parent or any caregiver who is raising children and adolescents, I just want to give so much grace because it's a lot. The pandemic has added layers. It's not just the pandemic. I mean, we were struggling, our communities were, our children and adolescents, uh, there was a growing number, statistically significant growing number of anxiety and depression in our children and youth before the pandemic. But since the pandemic, um, it's just exacerbated um, just nervous system health for the developing brain and body of children and youth. And it is challenging right now. So in our schools, there are new adverse childhood experiences, and they're not, I don't want to say new, but they're newly recognized. And we have to really embrace that and embody that. So our children of color, our immigration youth, our transgender youth. I mean, those children and adolescents are oftentimes ostracized and rejected. And we are over identifying and disproportionately suspending our Black and Brown children in our schools and our special education students. And that's not new, that's been happening forever. But it's the awareness of how that impacts not only our children, but their families and then the community. And then social media is another adverse childhood experience. And we had Donna Jackson, who's the author of Childhood Disrupted and Girls on the Brink. And she came to our graduate classes at Butler, and she was sharing about the impact of social media on our children and youth, and how it really impacts our evolutionary biology. And I want to share this because this is fascinating, because when you go back, I mean, the brainstem approximately is like 500 million years old. So when you go back into human evolution, into, let's say, hunter-gatherer, but when we lived in larger groups, our biology was created for survival. I mean, we all have a brain, and the priority of the brain and nervous system is survival. And if we felt or perceived rejection or isolation, or we were ostracized, or we were a part of the out group, then we would die. That's simple. Like if you were not with that group, your chances of survival were lessened. And so today, social media is the tiger. Social media is the predator. So if you don't get that like, if you don't get a repost, and these are, affecting children, if they're posting on Instagram, or, they're sharing on social media, and it's not being received well, then that feels like death to the nervous system. And I don't mean to be dramatic when I say that, but it is overwhelming to children to not have that validation, or adolescents. And social media has become a challenge. It's not going away. So as parents, as caregivers, as educators, we have to find a way to navigate social media, and to help our children and adolescents really find a path that is doable, and that doesn't feel so overwhelming. It's tricky. I don't have a solution, but it's not easy right now, with all that I just shared.
Well,
it's a lot.
Yes. I mean, hardly even have words for a response in it.
Yeah.
I'm noticing my own nervous system kicking in with an eye twitch around it. It's just so much.
Yeah.
And I even think about how many children have lived through threats, or the actual situation of having an active shooter in their school.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable what is competing not only for their attention, but for their survival. I mean, we think about social media, that's kind of an easy one, but when you think about what they hear and what they've actually witnessed firsthand, how you focus in that environment, I don't even know. I really just don't even know. It's difficult. So I'm wondering, as a connector to this, how do you see trauma? And it could be any of these things that we've been talking about. Someone doesn't like your social media post, or there was an active shooter a month ago, or COVID, you're still recovering from that, or maybe you lost several people that you loved and took care of you during COVID. There are just so many layers to what can accumulate as trauma. But how do you see that manifesting in students?
It manifests through behaviors. And that is why this work is critically important. And I wake up every day and go to sleep at night thinking about, how do we create and cultivate collective understanding about not labeling and classifying and giving acronyms to the nervous system. Now, I do want to say that it is very helpful to identify children and adolescents that can be served and supported through their nervous system experience. So it's, I want to be very careful to affirm the neurodiversity of students, because they do need to be identified whether they are autistic or whether they have had a classification or label of attention deficit disorder. I mean, so there's a gray area here. And I want to be so respectful, because identifying those children and adolescents that learn differently, and that's an asset. And so the neurodiversity piece of this, we have to acknowledge, and we learned from them. So but if we're always focused on the behavior, then if we're always talking about depression or anxiety, or we're talking, or we're labeling, students pathologizing, let's say, just pathologizing those behaviors, then we get more of it. It reinforces, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I know this because this is the work I'm doing with our children, whether it is middle school, elementary, or high school. I've worked pre-K through 12. And over and over again, our children are so empowered and relieved to know that I'm not a bad kid and there's nothing wrong with me. My nervous system has learned through my experiences, my relationships, and my environments. It's that important right now.
Very, very critical work that you are doing. Recently, this is a little bit of a jump, but I do want to touch on this because it really has been camping out in my mind. Something you recently posted on social media. You talked about transitional characters. And this is something you said, you referenced Dr. Broderick, a marriage and family scholar at USC. And I will read what you said. You said a transitional character is one who in a single generation changes the entire course of a lineage. Their contribution is a filter. It filters out the destructiveness of that lineage so that generations to come will have a downstream and supportive foundation upon which to build. Wow. Tell me about transitional characters. Who have you met? Who's felt like a transitional character? Or how does this show up in your work?
Well, this is new research for me. I was not just over the last few weeks. And it validated those individuals that I have been privileged to sit beside in professionally, that are they're planting seeds, they're game changers. They have a strength in their awareness. And I mean, they're aware of their nervous systems and those they work with. And so I love how he describes that in a personal way, like what we say chains of pain can be broken in what we know as generational trauma. So if we're aware of the trauma, the adversity, the ACEs that came before us, and we can begin to experience those patterns, we feel them in our nervous systems, we see them, we observe them, then we get to choose. And, really life is about perception. And so it's, we get to choose. And so as he is speaking to generational trauma in families, I thought, oh my gosh, the impact in our schools. If there were educators in buildings who could begin to model deeply awareness of their own nervous systems and begin to create this culture of felt safety in their classrooms, or as an administrator, as a school leader, to create this culture of felt safety for staff, then that has just this trickling down effect where our children watch us name our triggers or our activators. They watch us resource ourselves. They see us nourish our nervous systems, whether it is popping a mint in our mouth or grabbing a cold bottle of water or taking 3 or 4 or 5 deep breaths. or focusing on an image, a sound. It's that important. And again, it goes back to priming the nervous system. And this is a term I use a lot this year, and it's getting out in front of our own behavior. And that's really what it's about. When we think about being a transitional, significant transitional character, it is really getting out in front of our own behavior as a parent, as a caregiver, as an educator.
I'm wondering if you have a favorite practice to help you or educators get out in front of their behavior. And if you'd be willing to share that with us, maybe you have a short practice that we could practice in this moment.
Mm-hmm. So this is from the Polyvagal Institute, and again, we've got this beautiful vagus nerve that we don't have time to talk about that today, but it really activates that part of the nervous system where our respiration lowers, our blood pressure lowers, and our heart rate lowers. So I'll share in that practice. And so you take your dominant, you take your non-dominant hand and you just hold your neck. So for me, it's my right hand. And then I take so it's kind of like you're giving yourself like a neck support. And then you take your dominant hand and you just hold onto your cheek. And then you just take 2 or 3 or 4 deep breaths, but extending the out breath and slowing it down. So we could try that.
I love it. Let's do it.
We'll take one more deep breath. And then if you could just rotate your neck and just kind of in both directions and just kind of feel, I'm holding a lot of tension. I can feel it at the base of my brain. That's where it's that C3 vertebrae. Just kind of stretch and maybe just kind of pull back your shoulders, because we tend to sit kind of forward. Yeah.
What came to me is that would be a great way to level up kind of the getting home or getting to the office or coming out of the office, those transitional moments.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just sitting there and breathing, risk people in the parking lot maybe giving me a strange look, but knowing that it's kind of a cradling. It feels very comforting to hold ourselves like that. I would love to walk us through super quick the glowy daily reflection practice, and then give you a chance to promote your upcoming book and anything else you would like folks to check out. There's so much, friends. Really, there is so much to check out. So one of the ways that I regulate myself is in the morning, starting with the glowy daily reflection practice. It's an acronym for gratefulness. So one thing I'm grateful for, one thing that I want to lift up for myself or others, those resources, a bit of a prayer, if you will, what I observe in my body or my surroundings, potentially even my nervous system. The W is for wholesome intention. We all have those wholesome intentions that we take into our day or a particular moment. And the Y is for a positive affirmation. You are. And so I will guide you through this, and I would love your responses to those. Lori, what is one thing you're grateful for?
My health. comes to mind. Yeah, my health.
What's one thing that you would like to lift up for yourself or for someone else?
I would love just to lift up some steadiness, groundedness, some peace. Mhm.
What's something you observe either in yourself, in your body, in your mind, or in your surroundings?
I think I observe just the word that comes to mind. It's not really specific, but it's kind of fastness. You know, things are moving fast. Things feel to be happening fast. Time is fast. I'm observing that.
What's a wholesome intention of yours for your life or even for this day or this moment?
Mhm. To be present in the moment. That is something I think about a lot because I can feel my mind wandering, going back, and then forward. And I think the power of this moment and being with it is something I would love to be able to do more often, to hold more often.
Absolutely. And the why is for you are. So, Dr. Desautels, you are
Um, Present right now.
love it. I love it. Thank you for doing that practice with me. I would love the opportunity for you to share with us about your new book where folks can, is it open for pre-order or will be soon?
Will be soon, but so my website is just filled with resources for caregivers, parents, educators, and we intentionally have created so many free downloadable templates, and it's revelationsineducation.com. And all of the books that I've written are there. We have audiobooks as well for my newest book, Intentional Neuroplasticity, that came out a year ago, January, and then Connections Over Compliance. And then the new manual, we are super excited. We'll just stay tuned because it's going to be in the next couple of months where it will make its debut.
Well, that is so wonderful. Excited for you and your team.
Thank you.
Well, folks, definitely check out her website. You can also even see or listen to her on other podcasts. Lots of insightful topics on there to choose from. Lots and lots of information. So I want to thank you so very much, Dr. Desautels. You have been a joy to have on the show, and I know that you have blessed so many lives, not only in this show, but around the world. And I just appreciate your work so very much.
Amy, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation.
From my heart to yours, may you live with ease. This is your host, Amy Morgan, signing off. Today's podcast is sponsored by Good Aim Communications. Learn more about this full-service marketing agency at goodaimcommunications.com.